One of the key elements of Fallen is Amogu's mind reading powers. We considered at first doing it the more traditional way by just having audio for thoughts, so having like the character whose mind is being read speak the thoughts and have that dialogue just be like floating, like voiceover. But I thought having actual text to represent the thoughts would be a lot more believable, and it would interfere with dialogue less and it just sell the whole thing a lot better. So we decided to go with that way, and then after that the technical challenge was how to attach a piece of text to a character and make it look like that's their thought. So this is a final effect that we came up with. It's just, as I described, a piece of text attached to the character, and it looks like it's their thought. So to see how we did it, you'll notice that in Premiere Pro this is actually a linked After Effects composition. That's because we did all of our effects, all of our composition in After Effects. So if we open up After Effects, we can see all the fancy behind the scenes stuff. So let's go to the right scene shot. Here it is. So what we see here, the base layer here is just the raw footage. It's just a raw video file, ungraded, unedited, uncut, everything. This is just a raw file with text pasted onto it, and then in Premiere Pro, here's the color grade. So the color grade is put on top of the After Effects composition, and then black bars also. So that's how we did that. So in After Effects, how we did the tracking is, if we go into the base layer, we have a 2D track point here. So what this track point is the smaller box here specifies a group of pixels that we want to identify, that we want to follow, and then the larger box is where in the next frame After Effects will be searching for that group of pixels. So what that does is it gives us a position point for every single frame where Haroon's ear here is what we've decided to track is relative to the frame. And that's a pretty good representation of also how his head is moving. So what that allows us to do is, after we have all these track points, if we go back into the composition, I created a new null object here and pasted the position coordinates onto the null object. So now we have a null object that follows the movement of Haroon's head. And then once we have that, we can just take a piece of text, which is here, parent it to the null, which you can see here. And what that does is now the text just follows around Haroon's head, and it looks like it's his thoughts. And one extra thing that we did is, if we turn off this for a second, if it's just a raw parent, and if the only thing that's following around is position, it looks like this, which is really, really jittery. The text looks jittery. It looks super out of place. It's not very believable at all. So we added a little bit of motion blur, and that just makes it look like the camera, it's coming, I guess, through a lens. It just adds a layer of believability. It just adds an atmosphere to it that makes it a lot more believable. And I think the final effect looks like that, and I think it worked pretty well. So switching to another example, this is a more complicated scene. This is a waking up scene when we had a ton of track points because we needed a different track point for every character in every shot. So what we have here is the same thing as what we had there. We have a track point with position coordinates pasted onto a null following each of the characters, and then text parented to the null, so it's following around their heads. But one additional effect that we had is we added a blur to the text in addition to the motion blur. So that's because the camera, the image here, the raw file, is out of focus, and that's, because Moog is waking up, he's disorientated. That's the effect we were going for. And you can see we added this extra blur to make the text look out of focus as well. So without the blur, with the motion blur, it just looks a little out of place. And adding the blur just really helps sell it. It makes it look more out of focus, more part of the scene. And we use a mix of these effects in all the other shots. So for example, this one, you can see it's the same idea. So that's how we did. That's one way. That's the 2D way. One of two ways that we did the mind reading effect in Fallen.